And I welcome everyone to our What the Heck Do I Do with This Ingredient? The Passover edition. And we're very happy that Karen Rothman and Judy Kalman and Alisa Stone have come back again to do some demoing and show us some simple ways that we can use some easy to hand ingredients to enhance our Passover eating this year. And particularly this year, that would be especially appreciated and helpful. So I'm just going to also mute everybody else who is not talking or presenting at this time. And feel free to use the chat for questions, and we can take some questions at the end. And I hand over to our chefs. Thank you.
Everything is being done through
So Judy is going to be doing it first, I know.
Right. Okay. Okay. I just unmuted myself. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. I was saying I'm almost embarrassed by this recipe because it's so easy, but I think that's what we want to strive for, particularly this year when ingredients are limited and we're so busy with so many other things, and I think we need something easy. So what I did before we started is I preheated my oven to 300 degrees, and that's all set, ready to go. And what I'm going to show you is the technique for making chocolate chip meringue cookies. And I guess I should start by saying these are good all the time, not just on Passover. And I also put 3 eggs in a bowl, 3 egg whites rather, in a bowl. I did that in advance. I didn't want to mess up the whites with the yolk on camera. And also I wanted to do it ahead of time because egg whites beat best when they're at room temperature around 70 degrees. If they're too cold, they're not going to whip up with the amount of volume that you need to make a meringue. So I'm going to add these to my mixing bowl. And the other thing I'm going to add is 1/8 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar. And before I turn my mixer on and make a lot of noise, I need to tell you that cream of tartar, there's a difference of opinion as to whether it's strictly Pasodic or not. So if you're strictly Pasodic, you'll want to use a little lemon juice or a tiny bit of vinegar instead of cream of tartar. I can guarantee these are going to be long gone before Pesach begins, so I just made it easy for myself and put the cream of tartar. But I noted that change on the recipe card, so please just make a mental note. I'm going to turn the mixer on high. It's going to make a little bit of noise, but it won't take long to be whipped up.
Judy, while you're waiting, can you tell us how you separate the whites? Because I know there's a lot of ways to do that.
What I do, I don't know if you can hear me okay? Okay. What I do is I hold them over a bowl and I use the shells. In my view, the shell is the best thing even when you get a piece of shell in something because it's something that's compatible with the albumin. So I just hold the yolk inside the 2 shells and I save them for a later use. What I'm waiting for here is I'm waiting for the whites to be stiff. It takes just a minute or 2, but it's very important to have them stiff. And I couldn't do it ahead of time because I need the air and the volume in order for the cookies to come out right. So we're just about there. I can tell they're very white, and I can see heat starting to form. Give it another 10, 20 seconds, and I think it'll be ready. And I'll show you what it should look like. Okay. So noisy, sorry. The is going to be hard to show you. I don't know. Let's see. I had to take the beater off, and then I'm going to have to put it back on again, but it's the only way to do it. There we go. Okay, so I think, can you see that nice white peaks there? And I'm going to put it back on the stand and put the beater. This is the type of instrument I used. You can also use a hand mixer, one of those small ones, which might have been better for the next time, I'll remember, because I could have used a plastic bowl instead of the metal. It wouldn't have made so much noise. Okay, now I'm going to add a half a cup of sugar. And I have it ready, of course, in advance. And I'm going to add it slowly while the beater is on just the lowest setting. Very, very slowly. I'm going to add the sugar. Because we're trying to keep the volume. Oops. Okay, we're trying to keep the volume of the egg whites, and the only way to do it is to add the sugar very slowly. I have my beater on the lowest setting, and I'm just tapping the bowl with my hand. I think you can see that. Inch by inch. There we go. Okay. I'm going to turn the mixer off, take my bowl off. On this KitchenAid, you have to take the beater off before you can get the bowl out. So there we go. And I'm going to put the beater aside. And now I'm going to move this aside because I don't need the mixer anymore. Okay, good. Now I'm going to take a simple spatula like this. We're going to fold in half a cup of chocolate chips and half a cup of nuts. And one of the other reasons this recipe is so easy, everything's half a cup of sugar, half a cup of chocolate chips, half a cup of nuts. The recipe calls for pecans. I don't happen to have them. Almonds works fine. I'm going to use these beautiful chopped almonds. They come that way, and I'm going to slowly fold them in. I want to maintain the volume of the egg whites, so I'm going to be using a very slow stirring motion like this and adding a little at a time. I'm going to try to be very gentle. If you lose the air volume, you're going to lose the character of the cookies later. So a little at a time, 1 or 2 turns of the spatula. Took me three rounds there. Okay, so maybe 8 turns of the spatula altogether. And now I'm going to take my cookie sheet. And what I did with the cookie sheet beforehand is I put the tin foil on upside down. So I have the dull side up. And put my spatula away too, because I don't want it to get in the way. And I have 2 teaspoons, and it's just plain old teaspoons. I sprayed them with Pam just to make it a little easier to work with. I'm gonna,
Judy,
yeah.
Can you tilt your screen down so we can see what you're doing on the cookie sheet? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Oh, you should have been a producer. You're so good. Okay, so this is a teaspoon of the meringue batter. I have another teaspoon in my hand. I'm going to push it off. And I should be able to get about, I'm going to say about 20 cookies, a little bit apart like that. And I'm going to continue like this till my cookie sheet is full, and then I'm going to put it in the middle rack of the oven. And my oven is at already 300 degrees, and I'm going to bake for 30 minutes while Alisa or Karen does her recipe, and then we'll come back and show you what they look like. Okay, so I'll hand off to Alisa, I think, at this point. You don't have to watch me do this 30 times. You get the picture?
I think I'm up next.
Karen?
So I think so, because you have to wait for mine to cook too.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to make quinoa and black beans and corn, and this recipe is kosher for Passover, but I found it because sometimes when people need a meal, somebody is sick, I volunteer to cook for them, and this particular person had many food requirements, including many allergies, being vegan, lactose free, and gluten-free. So I Googled it and I found this recipe, and it happens to be kosher for Passover. I have made it many times. I've made it for dinner. I've made it for brunch. It can be served room temperature. It can be served right out of the refrigerator. So it's very versatile. I also sometimes use it as a side dish. Like if I have a bunch of people for dinner, which obviously isn't going to happen anytime soon, sometimes I'll make a main dish either in meat or in chicken, but then I will use this as a very high protein vegetarian option also. So it's quinoa and black beans, and the first thing I started to do prior to starting, when Judy was cooking, I started to fry some onions, and what I wanted to do is to just show you, I just browned them a bit, alrighty, and what we're gonna do, recipe, I'm gonna turn them on again, and what we're gonna do is for some reason or another, Judy, Rabbi, for some reason or another, Judy is on the screen.
Yeah, and I'm going to mute
yourself.
She was muted, and don't worry about it. I can see what is being recorded, and you were in the center of the screen. Just keep going.
Okay.
I'll let you know if there's a problem.
Thank you, as long as you can see yourself. So what I'm going to do now is there's a few cloves of garlic here that I think you can see. I can't see myself, so I can't see. So I just didn't know if you guys knew how to peel garlic cloves. This is the technique that I learned. So this is just a whole garlic clove. If you take a knife, and obviously watch your fingers when you do this, and put it perpendicular and just go like that, you're going to get rid of the skin, just like that. And it's a really quick way to get that garlic started, because it's a pain in the neck to cut that skin off. Anyway, so then we just have to cut off any ends of the garlic. And then we're just going to mince it, and I purposely fried the onions partway first. And the reason why is because garlic can burn very quickly when you cook it. So even if a recipe says to add garlic and onions at the same time, I will generally add the garlic just over the last couple of minutes. And also, when you are frying onions, oftentimes they say, like, toss, you're supposed to saute them by, you keep on continuously moving them in the pan, and you really don't need to do that. All you need to do is you just make basically a tower of the onions and put them in a pan, and then they just cook down. And then what I do, because they have been cooking down, is I'm just going to give them a little bit of a toss. Can you guys see? And then I'm going to just add my garlic, which I've now diced. My son Josh, who is trained as a professional chef, would be horrified to see me having just chopped that, because they are not all the same size. I just don't have the ability to do that, but he can do it, and faster than I can. Alrighty, so we're just going to leave that, it's just cooking. I'm browning a little bit more, and the garlic is getting a little bit softened. And while that's going on, I'm going to get the next part of it ready. So the recipe calls for quinoa. So this happens to be red quinoa. So quinoa you can get, quinoa is a nice grain because it's kosher for Passover, which is very good. It's also very high in protein. And it's it's a pretty versatile thing. Sometimes when people use like white quinoa or the plain quinoa, they might not think it has much of a taste. The red quinoa has a little bit of a nuttier flavor, and there's also black quinoa, and that has a little bit of an earthy flavor, almost like mushrooms. It's very good with mushrooms. So you can also get mixtures of it. Essentially, I got this because it was the only bag of quinoa left in the market when I went there. So to the quinoa, we're going to have to add a couple of spices. We're going to be adding cumin, cayenne pepper, and then salt and pepper. And I was thinking, as I was watching Alisa cook last week, that she does many things just by taste. And I also oftentimes cook by taste with things like salt and pepper, and also like cinnamon and stuff like that, vanilla. But when I'm cooking with spices like cumin, curry, cayenne pepper, I usually measure them out because a little bit can go a long way. And I may alter it depending on my taste eventually, but I want to make sure that I'm not making it too spicy, because you can't get it out once it's there. So that was a teaspoon of cumin, and now I'm going to also add a quarter of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. That's or cayenne pepper. I don't know actually how it's supposed to be pronounced, but that's red pepper. And we also are going to be adding salt and pepper. It doesn't tell you how much. Again, this is part really to taste. You can just use the pepper out of a jar if you want. This is peppercorns that I'm just grinding. And then some salt. I can tell you that unless you really have to be on a low sodium diet, salt is really a flavor enhancer, and you don't have to put a ton of salt in food, but it really does make things taste better when they have salt in them. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put this mixture of the quinoa and the spices right over the pan that has the onions and the garlic in it. And I'm just going to give it a mix just for a minute, I'm going to give the quinoa just a moment to just roast in the pan. You don't have to do that, but sometimes it just gives it a little bit of extra bite, which I like. And then we're going to add, it says to add stock, vegetable broth or stock. If you wanted, you could use chicken broth or beef broth. Obviously, then it would not be vegetarian. But I wanted to show you the stock that I usually use. I have to get it out of the fridge. I'm not actually a big Wegman shopper, but this is a product that they have that I really like. It's called Thai culinary stock, and so it also has a lot of spices within it. It is vegetarian and it is gluten-free if that's important to you. So it calls for 1.5 cups of vegetable broth. And one thing that's really important in this recipe is that what it says is that we're going to add the vegetable broth, then we can give it a stir, and then it says to bring it to a boil. And it does not say to cover it. It says to bring it to a boil and then cover it. Hold on, I just have to give it a little stir. And I'm just going to wait for that to go to a boil. The reason why you have to bring it to a boil is because, and then when it says to cover it, you keep it covered and you do not peek. And the reason why is because somehow I've done it the wrong way. Sometimes, and I have read about this, somehow you wind up with very mushy quinoa. So you really should make it that way. Let it come to a boil and then cover it, and then don't touch it. If it says leave it for 20 minutes covered, don't peek. I don't know why it seems to work best that way, but it does. So it's almost to a boil now. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to prepare what is going to be put in a bit later. and that is the cilantro and black beans. So for the black beans, all I did was I bought a couple cans of black beans. I actually could only find one in Wegmans, and I found one in Roach Brothers. And by then I was a little bit desperate, so I then went to BJ's and got 8 cans of black beans. So I'm sure I have enough if any of you find yourself needing one. I'm going to cover this because it's now boiling. And I just have to set my timer, and I have to grab the cilantro out of the refrigerator. Hang on. Cilantro's coming. All right, so cilantro looks very similar to wide leaf parsley. You just have to be careful when you buy it. It has a very distinctive smell. Also, you may be aware that some people say, like, I'm allergic to cilantro, or they just say, I hate it. And some people apparently have a gene that makes it that when you taste something with cilantro, it tastes like you're eating soap. So that Thai culinary stock that I mentioned also has cilantro in it. So if you have someone that really hates the taste of cilantro, it does not taste anything like parsley. And you could potentially make this dish with parsley instead, but it would really lose the flavor of it. It's really kind of a Spanish or at least Central South American dish, and cilantro, the black beans, and the corn all add to that. So you could change it to a different spice. You could leave it out, but it would taste significantly different. And I just coarsely chopped that. And if you notice, the recipe that you get says half a cilantro. So it I never knew what that meant, and I still don't know what actually they meant. It might have been that they left something out of the recipe when it was printed, but if you go to buy cilantro in season, then you wind up with a huge bunch of cilantro. And if you go to buy cilantro this time of year, you wind up with a small bunch of cilantro. So I usually put in approximately a cup of loosely packed cilantro for a single recipe. In terms of the black beans, if you've used black beans before, just one tip I have for you is that you should really just let them sit and drain for a while, because over a sink, because this just black goop comes out of it, and it's not very pleasant. Also, I tend to wash them kind of like you would wash rice before you use it. So I wash them through first. So now the beans are draining, the cilantro is chopped, and I am going to turn you over to Alisa.
Hi, everyone, and happy almost Passover. What would Passover be without something made with matza meal? And when I thought about what we would be cooking tonight with you, I thought of a staple. Where would we be without our bagel, right? Woohoo, bagels. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, you name it, right? And I thought to make it a little more interesting, I'm going to save a little surprise while I do the demo. So let's get started. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is water an ingredient? Okay. If it is, 6 ingredients. You got to have these on hand around Passover, I am sure. So the first would be our matza meal. And by the way, the recipe that we've shared with you all, it's easily divisible for 4 portions, and that's what I've done tonight. So I've actually already cooked 1 portion, which made for me about 3 nice bagels. We're making 1 fresh, and then I had 1 in the fridge because I want to show you my special little technique. So it's basically 3/4 of the recipe that I'm making for you tonight. So starting off with matza meal. Very scientific. I'm going to go with salt, and that is only a 1/4 teaspoon. And sugar, teaspoon on that. And by the way, on these seasonings, you can add any flavoring that you'd like. So if you want something a little more savory, maybe throw in a little minced garlic. Want something sweet? Throw in a little more sugar and maybe some cinnamon. They don't have to be boring matza. And I'm going to also right now heat up my water. And to the boiled water, I will add oil. You can also do that on the stovetop, but we're going to take a minute just to be quick for time. I'll be right back. So while that's going, I'm going to give my dry goods here a little zhuzh, get everyone happy. And I pre-measured my oil, and that goes. The last ingredient that we'll add is an egg, and I'm not adding it last for tasting purposes so I can taste my mixture this time. Rather, I have hot ingredients. That water is going to be really to the boil. So when I add it to my bowl, I don't want to cook the egg if I follow along. So I like to let the ingredients after the water is poured in, let it steep a little bit, let it get cool almost to room temperature before I add my egg. And then I'm going to show you through the miracles of technology, as if my mixture had chilled a little bit in the fridge, what I do next. I'm going to grab my water. In that goes. Give a stir. All right, so we're going to pretend that's cooling. I'm going to add the egg, and then we'll be good to go. So, quick switch up. I have already, oh, that looks so appetizing, doesn't it? Karen's hysterical. I have our bagel mixture. Now here's the little surprise. How about a heart bagel? How about a flour bagel? Aside from flavor, we could zing it up with size and shape and have a little fun. So I had pre-cooked off the regular bagel, a heart, and I put a hole in it. And the flour, I just left that as a whole, like a roll. To make this as easy as possible, I am working with my chilled dough. And I have another little bowl of oil. And I'm gonna wash my hands just a second. Who doesn't have their handy pump of soap and water now? I'm going to take a little dollop, like a good sized meatball size, I would say. And I have an oiled piece of parchment. I'm actually going to tap my hand in a little oil as well. Remove my dough. And let's make a flour. So this is my metal cookie cutter. I'm throwing it into a little bit of oil, just coating it around. And rather than cutting it, because I don't think the matzo meal mixture would really hold up all that well if I rolled it and then used it like a cookie cutter into a sheet. So I'm just filling my cookie cutter with the dough. And then I'm popping it out. And because it's at the right temperature and I chilled my little mold, it actually came out pretty nicely. Then I have a baking sheet ready to go. I would just finish those off, throw them in the oven, 375, and you really do want it hot. And that's when it toasts up. It does fluff a little, not huge amount, but it fluffs a little bit. And you are good to go with your bagel. I want to talk toppings for a minute. So you have, of course, your traditional cream cheese and scallion and lox and all that wonderful goodness, right? I love to top these bagels with, let's say, tuna fish or chicken salad or something that speaks to you, whitefish salad. And for dinner, I remember as a kid having pizza bagels, right? And you can do a variety of toppings on those as well. I don't know if the rabbi's around and she could open up our microphones, but I'm wondering if anybody has any cravings, any suggestions, because it's really easy to do these bagels and I think you're going to enjoy making them and I encourage you to. So it's almost more interesting to find out what we top them with. Anybody have any ideas? Oh, we need to unmute our microphones.
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter. Okay, so unmute. Let's go one at a time. Cheryl had an idea. Judy, Inez has an idea.
No, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I wanted to know, how do you make the hole in the bagel?
So if I use my round mold, or even you just shape it by hand into a patty, I have a bunch of nice little cutters. So I have a smaller hole that then you would do the same thing. You oil around, punch it, and take out the hole. And I always bake off that little extra because it's just as delicious.
Ah, good. Okay, great.
I have a question, Alisa. Have you ever made them with the whole grain or whole wheat matza meal?
Sorry, my mouth is full of my delicious bagel. I have not, but why not? I don't know if you have to alter a little bit of the ratio to get it a little more moist, but I think you should give it a try. Also toppings. If you have some coarse ground, let's say salt or something, you know, like whatever your favorite topping is for a bagel that you feel comfortable using for Passover, maybe give that a shot. And in that case, I would probably just brush maybe a little egg on top, do the sprinkle and bake.
Are people familiar with these everything but the bagel seeds? This is my favorite thing. You can see it's almost empty. I go through these so fast. I put it on everything, even cantaloupe. It's really good on, but it's poppy, sesame salt, onion powder, onion flakes. It's really good.
Nice. Well, since you mentioned that on fruit, one of my favorite fruits is a ripe papaya and a whole bunch of lime juice, and you sprinkle with chili seasoning. If you haven't tried, and a touch of salt. If you haven't tried that, you're missing out, so give it a go. Oh, Helene, you're on mute, so we can't hear you. But we see your lips working.
Don't think.
There you go.
Okay. Do you oil the cookie sheet or anything?
So if I was baking this for real, I could take my parchment that I'm already using to help with my form. And yes, so the answer is yes.
So you put that on, okay.
I would use a liner, whether parchment or I have a silpat mat, which is silicone, you know, whatever your nonstick finish is. But it's pretty oily at that point. So I don't think you need to add more oil. I would recommend a baking sheet so you make it a little healthier.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question. Back in the day when we used to kind of go to work and go to school, leave the house, we were always in a hurry in the morning. And so I'm wondering, have you ever made the dough the night before or even formed it the night before and then just bake it off in the morning? Or does it have to dry? Have you ever tried?
I do that often, and that's a matter of fact, so really what I did with this, I made it much, much earlier and I left it in the fridge. I think you could probably even freeze the dough, and I've also frozen the cooked bagels.
Yeah, the good thing about stuff for Passover is that if you make something that you know that you never have to worry about it over rising.
Under rising though could be a problem.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I encourage you, have fun with it. So I have, this is a set of, I think it's about 8 forms for flowers. I have another that's about a dozen circles. So I look for these kinds of things in cooking stores and have some unique shapes. And I think that always just surprises people when you bring to the table an unusual shape or texture or color to something that's very common and ordinary.
Alisa, if you don't have cookie cutters, which I certainly do not have, you can just make a patty kind of thing?
Course.
Okay.
Of course.
Thanks.
Yep. You'd make the patty,
You
pop
can,
your finger in, and you have no hole cut out. Then you're just literally using your finger to make the center. So I can show you that.
the other thing that you can use is if you have a glass that has a clear edge to, you know, a well-defined edge, you can use that as well. It will also help you to, just as Alisa did for the molds, if you oil the inside of the glass first and the outside, that'll prevent it from sticking.
Good idea.
Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Karen, can I get unmuted again?
No, you're there. Go ahead.
I'm there. Karen, what did you put the gas down to when you covered it?
So I have a gas stove, so I put it.
That's what I asked. I assumed that. Yeah.
Basically low, simmer.
Okay.
Karen, while you have the floor, I have another question for you. Do you mind the stems in the cilantro, or do you just chop everything together?
So the answer is that all of cilantro can be used. I always cut off the very end of the stem because they're a little bit dried, and also because I don't know what where they've been. I usually use mostly leaves, but I do use, I don't worry about some of the stems being in there. They taste a little bit different, but but they never really make a difference in a recipe to my palate.
Any other favorite bagel memories while we've got a minute?
If we have no other questions, well, Alisa, because you need to do your next thing, right? You're going to show us what to put on them, right? Or you're not?
Nope. That's why we're just talking about it.
Oh, I was just thinking, in terms of Passover cooking, there are some, we sort of, beautiful. I think we kind of have two different philosophies about cooking during Passover. I think all of us want the food to be edible for sure, and ideally good. What I tend to look for usually in recipes is, when I'm looking at things, is I actually don't usually look for things that are necessarily have Passover ingredients in them. So for example, instead of using a graham cracker crust, I'd make a nut crust for a cheesecake, or I wouldn't make any crust for a cheesecake. And a lot of the things that we eat for food, many of our chicken dishes, our fish dishes usually are actually fine for Passover. I think the challenge is keeping down the amount of eggs that we use during the holidays, but really there's a lot of versatility to what we can cook. On the other hand, there are traditionalists who the idea of having special foods that you only make for Passover is what makes it really special. And so both certainly have a lot of validity. I didn't know if anybody noticed my apron.
Yeah.
Can you read my apron? It says, "Why is this night different from all other nights? Don't ask." I got my Passover earrings on too, but I don't think you can see them. Judy, I have 1 more minute. Yay!
This one I'm really proud of. It's almost uniformly round and dead center with my hole.
That looks good enough to eat. Like right now.
Right now. Everybody's hungry.
I have 6 minutes on my stove.
All right, so so mine is just about done. So in this recipe, we're back to the quinoa again, and what we're going to do now is it says to stir in frozen corn into the saucepan. So I'm sure you could make this with fresh corn, but I actually never have. Frozen corn is actually pretty good. And it conveniently comes in the right size package, and it stores in the freezer for a long time. So I'm gonna cut open my package, and I'm gonna check the quinoa. Oh, it still has probably another minute or two to go. So if we wind up overlapping on time here, Judy, then please feel free to join me. It says that the 20 minutes are up, but it looks like there's still a little bit of water in there. So I'm going to give that another minute to cook up. What I'm eventually going to do, though, is I'm going to add the corn in, and you stir it for about 5 minutes, and you're going to do that with it uncovered, because you want to liquid that the corn will add to it. And at the end of that, we're just going to add our cilantro and black beans, and we'll be all done. So let me just check it. All right, so I'm going to bring this over just so you can see it. So it's still a little bit mushy, but it's okay. And I'm going to turn it on again. And I'm just going to dump in my corn. And I'm going to give it a stir. And I'm just gonna cover that again and turn it back down to low. And I'm just gonna leave that for about 5 minutes before I add in the rest of the ingredients. I just have to set a timer. Hang on. Okay. All righty. Judy, how are you doing on time?
I have just 3 minutes to go, and then I'm afraid to open the oven too early. Yeah.
Any
I have a question for you about the corn. I don't use frozen vegetables too much, but on the rare occasions that I have, they tend to be watery and icy inside. And I'm just wondering, you just opened the bag and threw them in. You had no problem at all.
Right. That's what this recipe calls for, which is kind of amazing. And it says, like, keep it frozen. So I didn't actually take it out until right before I started to speak. I just took it right out of the freezer.
So frozen corn is one of the few frozen vegetables I ever buy. And it really does taste fresh. I don't know what they do with it, but I think they're great as a snack, just to eat frozen out of the bag.
Yeah.
Why not? And Judy, I'm going to freeze my batter, and I'm going to let you know what it tastes like, okay?
Oh, thank you. I like that. I have a question. I'm just wondering, since we have like a minute or two, beans and corn and quinoa and rice, when I grew up, we never ate that stuff. Peas, we never ate. And then I know that there was sort of an evolution in thought, and maybe in the 70s or the 80s, about what's Pesach and what's not. Does anyone have any insight into that?
I can tell you about that. So that group of products, so they're called kitniot in Hebrew. And so the Ashkenazis, Inez, who grew up Sephardic, always ate those foods, right? No? No? She's saying no. Not her. Okay. Oh. Well.
Not me. My husband did. We are a mixed couple. We are a mixed couple. Don't forget that.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. So, so the Ashkenazis, who most people who are in the United States today are Ashkenazi in origin. coming from Central Europe, Russia, etc. They believed that anything that looked like anything else needed to be banned for Passover. It was kind of like the principle of creating a fence around the Torah. So they barred those things from being eaten because they thought that they might be mistaken for things that were not kosher for Passover because they tasted like that. Now, the Ashkenazis weren't all completely by the book. Did anybody ever wonder why there are? Did anybody grow up in a tradition where you had potatoes on the Seder plate?
Yes.
Okay, well, Gordon's family did. And the reason for, can't hear you, Inez. You have
I
to,
said potatoes. I never heard of that.
so the reason why potatoes were placed on the Seder plate is because people living in Eastern Europe who were very poor and were not necessarily farmers had no access to green vegetables. So in that tradition, potatoes are considered a green vegetable.
Makes sense.
Or not.
Makes sense then. It's fine.
All righty. Okay, we are ready now to add our final ingredients in. Timer just went off, and what we're going to do is we're going to add in the cilantro, and then I'm going to add in the black beans, and I'm going to give it a stir, and hopefully you can see it now. Can you see it?
You can feed an army with that.
What?
You can feed an army with that.
Yeah, so when I make it, I've made this for the temple a bunch of times, and I usually double the recipe, but this is a lot of food. So this is a main meal, and I would say, like, Gordon and I are pretty big eaters, and I would say that this is going to be 2 or 3 meals for us. So for Passover, we actually only do dairy stuff just because I'm too lazy to take out 2 extra sets of dishes, so we just do dairy stuff. So I might serve this as a side dish, or I might serve this as a main dish. And like I said, people do eat it for breakfast also. I've served it for brunches. Really any time is fine. And that's what it looks like. It's very colorful, and it's got a lot of bite to it. If you think it's too spicy, you can put in less of the cayenne and the cumin and the cilantro. And if you like it more spicy, you can just add in more. So bon appetit.
That looks delicious. I took my cookies out of the oven. You can see I'm focusing on them. You can see they're light and fluffy. I don't want to take them off the cookie sheet. I tried. It's a little, I should wait till they cool off or else they're going to break. But I got, so here's 16 on this sheet. I have 12 on the other sheet. So 28 cookies altogether from that recipe. I wish you could smell them because I can smell the chocolate, and it's making me crazy because I haven't had any dinner yet.
I'll be right over.
Anytime, Elaine.
Those are
Oh no, but you got to keep your 6 feet.
so beautiful.
Karen, thank you for that quinoa. I mean, that recipe is actually something I think I could make.
Which one?
The quinoa
Oh,
with black beans. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I plan on doing that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent dishes, all 3 of them. Thank
All
you
3,
so much.
yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have
Teacher.
a happy and safe Passover,
Thank you, everyone.
everybody.
Thank you. Any other final questions about Passover? Or if you need any other recipes, you can email me. Just general categories. Just feel to email me. I'll send the emails on to Judy and Alisa, my 2 co-conspirators, and we'll see if we can help you out.
Thank you
Sounds
so
like
much.
a plan.
All of you.
Alright.
Thank you.
Have fun. Keep cooking.
My thanks to
Bye.
Karen and to Judy and to Alisa for another wonderful cooking demo. And I hope everybody's able to find something delicious that they can make over Passover. And finding some way of connecting over Passover, do remember you can join us for our second night community online Passover, 4 to 5:30 next Thursday. So until then, everybody take care. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Much.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.